edited and I posted out on our YouTube channel. So that way those who want to get the replay can do so. So I want to say good morning to each of you. You have joined me for this morning's Serendipity Sunday. As I was in silent meditation on last night, the message that came to me this morning has to do with the mute button. Many of us have mute buttons, and I wanted to kind of look at, sometimes we use things, but not in their actual design. For many of us, we use our mute button so that the noise that is going on in the background of where we are, others can't hear when we're perhaps talking on our mobile devices. So the function of the mute button is to really shut you out, where you can totally listen. Many times we are using the mute button improperly. We're using it so that what is going on in the background of where we are is not available to the individual who is speaking to us. It gives the false impression that someone has your undivided attention. In many cases, we don't need to use the mute button, but we choose to use it. The mute button is most effective if you're really trying to hear what someone is saying, but at the same time, there's noise in the environment that you can't control, or you're in a space that is not offering the silence that is necessary on your end. And so we mute. So that way the person who is speaking to us is not distracted. But what I've found, particularly during this COVID, many people are using the mute button to continue to multitask. So you may be listening, like some of you may be listening to me right now, and I have everyone muted. But if I didn't have many of you muted, you probably would mute your background because perhaps you're listening to something else, or you're typing something, or you're doing something, and it can be picked up. And that's the interesting thing, because what you need to know that God desires to speak to each and every one of us, source, universal intelligence, whatever you desire to call it. Yes, I call it it, because to define it as he or she is to limit it and its ability to express as it. And so this morning, I wanted to introduce you to the silence. I want to introduce you to the concept of the silence and how essential it is in order for you to hear what God is saying. God is always speaking. But when it speaks, it's not in a loud voice. But if you enter into the silence properly, guess what? It will sound as a loud voice. So this week, we're going to be looking at the application of experiencing the silence. I believe it's going to be Wednesday nights. I'm going to begin to, starting this week, go deeper into what has been taught or what has been introduced during Serendipity Sunday. For those of you who are first-time participants, serendipity means something good and unexpected. Serendipity Sunday is about a brief message that is good and unexpected. So this morning's message is God is speaking. The problem is we aren't listening. One of my favorite, and you often hear me say my favorites, but one of my truly favorite Bible chapters has to do with 1 Samuel. Now, 1 Samuel metaphysically is important that you understand what the term or the name, or see, when you talk about the Bible, it's names, people, places. We often make the mistake of literalizing them, and then we're limited in our understanding of the message that is being sent to us. When we were children, we thought as children. We believed in fairy tales and stories. But as we grew older, we come to understand that those stories fairy tales. They weren't lies. They were messages given to us in a way that we could incorporate a truth at that point in our lives. The word says when we were children, we spoke as children. But when we become adults, we put away childish things. Too many of us are engaged and embraced in childish things. One childish thing, from a metaphorical perspective, could be religion. Religion is a base understanding, an attempt to tie oneself to or back to source, to God, from a place of the sensory realm or intellect. God's source isn't to totally be engaged through intellect. It is not a mental exercise that you engage in. And so we must learn to move to the deeper or to a higher understanding of what many of us has been introduced to. So when we look at 1 Samuel, it's interesting. I was looking in my metaphysical Bible this morning, and I looked up 1 Samuel, and one of the things that came away with the name Samuel mean heard of God, instructed of God. And that basically what it's saying to each of us as we identify with the character of Samuel, we need to hear God, and we need to know that God hears us. So I want to introduce to you this morning a process that Samuel learned early in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 3. I want to share that with you because many of you perhaps are not familiar with it. I want to share that with you, and then I want to unpack a little bit of it, preparing you for the deeper teachings that will take place this Wednesday evening. Again, I thank each of you for joining us. I see some have joined in the Zoom room, and some have dropped off. Great. So those who are supposed to be with us are with us. Those who have ears to hear are listening. So let's look at 1 Samuel chapter 3 this morning. And it reads as follows. I'm going to only read a portion of it so I can set the stage for what I need to speak into your life on this morning. So firstly, I want to say in 1 Samuel chapter 3, Samuel served the Lord by helping Eli. Now, Samuel was a little boy, a young prophet that was committed back to God by his mom. And so he was given to the priest, Eli, early on in his life, and Eli was training him. So we see here, Samuel served the Lord by helping Eli, the priest who was, by the way, or by that time, almost blind. In those days, the Lord hardly ever spoke directly to people. But one night, Eli was asleep in the room, and Samuel was sleeping on a mat near the sacred chest in the Lord's house. Now, the sacred chest is the heart. The hearts of men. He was secure enough that he could really go to sleep, be at rest. And we'll unpack that a little more this week. And while he was asleep on the mat near the sacred chest in the Lord's house, they had not been asleep very long when the Lord called out Samuel's name. Some of you are familiar with the story. And he responded, "Here I am." Samuel answered. Then he ran to Eli and he said, "Here I am. What do you want?" "I didn't call you," Eli answered. "Go back to sleep." Samuel went back. Again, the Lord called out Samuel's name. Samuel got up and went to Eli. "Here I am," he said. "What do you want?" Eli told him, "Son, I didn't call you. Go back to sleep." The Lord had not spoken to Samuel before, and Samuel did not recognize the voice. When the Lord called out his name for the third time, Samuel went to Eli again and said, "Here I am. What do you want?" Eli finally realized that it was the Lord who was speaking to Samuel. So he said, "Go back and lie down. If someone speaks to you again, answer, 'I'm listening.' If someone speaks to you again, answer, 'I'm listening, Lord. What do you want me to do?'" Once again, Samuel went back to lay down, and the Lord then stood beside Samuel and called out his name, had done before, "Samuel, Samuel." "I'm listening," Samuel answered, what do you want me to do? So I wanted to set this week's meditation up simply by exploring this story. We see here for the very first time this young person in training finally hears the voice of the Lord. And it's interesting that this voice comes to him in a way that is totally aligned with what the scriptures tell us. If you have your Bibles and get the opportunity, I would like you to know that the scriptures speak directly to the importance of being properly positioned to hear from God at the most opportune times. So when we look in the book of Psalms chapter 4, or the fourth division of Psalms, there's a scripture I wanted to share. But it goes like this in verse 3. But know that the Lord has set apart him that is godly for himself, for itself. The Lord will hear when I call unto him. Stand in awe and sin not. The scripture is saying here, stand in awe and don't miss the mark. Commune with your own heart, where? Upon your bed, and be still. Why am I saying that to many of us? Because many of us are so busy doing something, thinking something. And some people may say, well, I have a spiritual practice that has to do with the silence. Just because you're quiet don't mean you're silent. Many times, although when we do get quiet, our minds continue to process things. Now, it's really interesting that out of the COVID experience that I recently had, I found myself falling off to sleep a lot. Even if I was sitting up watching TV, I was slipping into sleep. I found that there came a point that I was no longer just running scenarios through my head. Maybe it's because I really wasn't feeling well, and I didn't have the energy to think about this thing or that thing. And I got to a place where I was just silent. And I got to a place where I didn't want to hear my phone go off. I didn't want the TV on. And I found myself inside of the house, inside of my place. And not only was there quiet and solitude, but I had entered into a place of silence. But I found also there was a deeper silence besides just being in a meditative state of being still. When I began to slip off to sleep, I began to have a series of dreams. And I began to really experience what we find in Job 33, which I often refer to. In Job 33, verses 14 through 17, it says, for God speaketh once, yes, twice, yet man perceives it not. God speaks once, twice, yet we do not perceive it. Then it goes on in verse 15, it says, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, slumbering upon the bed, then it opens the ears of men, divine intelligence, God, source, opens the ears of men and sealeth their instruction, that he may withdraw man from his purpose and hide pride from man. So here's a nugget here. Many times when you want to know an answer, first you must be still. The word says, be still and know. And it goes on to say, be still and know that I am. And for many individuals in a evolving state of spirituality are not aware that it's not talking about something external, but it's talking about something internal. It's helping the individual to learn that it is not the God out there, but it is the God in here. It's the oneness of being that is available to you to hear from the inside versus the outside. Now, when we talk about the mute button, we need to use the mute button to drown out all the distractors and the noise, the things that are getting your attention while God or source is speaking to you. The beauty of God speaking to you at night is that you are powered down. Your sensory realm has slumbered into the state of rest. You're not using your eyes, your ears, your nose. You're not using your sensory realm. You're not using your intellect. For we know that this dream state has very little to do with the intellect, because in the dream state, you do, think, imagine some things that are not reasonable or rational. But it's in the dream state, which is more of an esoteric state, internal state, where God God, source, speaks to us through a dream. Now, many people can't understand their dreams, so they run off to someone and say, help me to understand the interpretation of this dream. You gotta be careful with that. You have to be careful that the individual who is interpreting your dream is not filtering it through their own life experiences, their own knowledge base. When you have a dream, just as we see with Samuel, when God speaks to you and says something to you, the very first thing you should do is say, here I am, acknowledging your present. Many people are present to the teachings that are set forth virtually. Although they may be present to the teaching, they're not totally present. And so what we have to learn to do is get to the place of being present to right here, right now, to move from always multitasking, because in the multitasking, you're missing something. And especially if you're engaging source in a conversation or a download, nothing should take preeminence over that. And we need to find time every day, not only in our sleeping hours, but in our waking hours, that we enter into the silence. I'm going to speak to that this week. I'm going to speak to the importance of entering into the silence and what the benefits of being able to enter into the silence. Now, we must know a couple of things. Monologue isn't meditation. Meaning, sometimes when we go into the silence, we go into this conversation with ourselves, or we go into the conversation with God, with source, and we are talking, but we're not listening. And sometimes you can hear God saying something to you, but you're waiting to ask another question, and just instead of just being still and present and hearing. Everyone who is hearing you isn't necessarily listening to you. How do I know that? Because many times when you begin to speak to individuals, excuse me, should have brought me some water with me. But when you begin to speak to individuals and you hear them say, I know, that means they're not listening. That means they are processing what you're saying, filtering it to what they believe, but they're not necessarily listening. When source speaks to you, it is not speaking to you to affirm many times what you already know, but to give you what you need to know. For if you had the solution, you wouldn't toss and turn. If you had the solution, you perhaps wouldn't even be petitioning for the answer. It's one thing to ask someone for a solution or for advice, but then it's another thing to heed or to listen, and in a way that is attentive, that says, I'm picking up what you're saying so I can apply it. What do you mean so you can apply it? When you look there in that scripture, Samuel said, I'm here. He acknowledged presence. He says, your servant is listening, acknowledging, being receptive and open to know what it is that you desire for me to do. See, many of us want to hear from God only if Source or God is affirming what we already have plans to do or what we are doing. Can Source, God, call an audible in your life? Now, if you're not a football person, you don't understand what the term audible means. An audible is when the quarterback steps up to the line to receive the ball, and he looks on the other side of the field and he sees the positioning of the defensive players. And although he may have given the particular play that's about to be ran when they came out the huddle, but he sees something different and he calls an audible. And that is, he may say a word or he may make a particular sound, and everyone knows that the play that was given in the huddle has been altered. God does the same thing. Source does the same thing. It may give you the play, but when you get to the field of activity, it changes it. Now, if you're not willing to hear and listen and trust God, you stay with what you heard God say yesterday. And see, that's what religion does. Religion continues to do what was spoken yesterday, that was appropriate for yesterday, that was a word of deliverance for that day, and attempt to use it in every way in this new day. It won't work. A relationship with Source, divine intelligence, with God, is a relationship that's always built in the present, in the now. And therefore, if you have a very present relationship with Source and even with yourself, you must always be listening. Another word for listening is observing. Sometimes we don't listen just with our ears, but we listen with our eyes. We are observing what is happening around us, external to us. We are observing what we are thinking. We are observing what we do, our behavior. Does your behavior align with what you espouse to be your belief? Many times they don't. Are you living today based on what has been said or has been done in the way of your story? Is your story getting in the way? So when we talk about the silence, it starts with muting yourself so you can't be heard. And not because you're doing something or multitasking, but realizing that at this moment, it is important that I receive, that I listen. Interesting that Samuel learned this early on in his life. And many of us need to learn the same lesson, how to listen. Not listening from a place of, I already know, but listening from the place of there's something that's being spoken that I need to know. That's important. And that's why even when we are receiving a teaching such as this, you enter into the silence at the completion. That you may get the upload that goes beyond what has been downloaded, what may appear to be or superficially something that's been given on level, the message behind the message. And it's in the silence. It's that place that you go to that you're no longer speaking. It's that place that you get to where your brain shuts down. That's why we enter into the silence, starting with the breathing exercise. Because it's impossible to think and breathe at the same time. or pay attention to your breath at the same time. And so when you learn how to follow the breath in, follow the breath out as a simple spiritual practice, it's really preparing you to enter into that secret place, that silent place. That's what I want all of us to get to. Learning how to live in the silence. A knowingness, an awareness that comes that supersedes the intellectual knowledge you gain. It's the place that you go to that is beyond the place of intuition, and you're in the presence and the oneness of being. So we must learn this morning that faith comes by hearing. So first you have to hear it. And then the hearing, true hearing, comes by the word of God. And that is that you must know that many are the plans of man, but the end thereof is destruction. Trial and error is what so many of us are going through. Reading many books and all of those things. But every book you read has been penned by another person, another human being. And that human being sometimes is espousing ideas that they themselves have not experienced. It's theory. But I want you to know that a life that is lived inside of application is a life that brings forth a true transformation. The word says, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. So one of the things we have to move from the understanding of that our brains, our intellect often get in the way. If you want to do the thing you've been designed to do, if you want to receive the thing you have been designed to have, if you want to really be the person that you know you should be, you have to learn to listen. You have to learn to not only go to the manufacturer's manual, what is it, Jeremiah 29:12, I know the plans I have for you to prosper you, to give you success, to get you to an expected end. Who is the I? Source knows. And who is source? You are. So you even know, but you don't trust yourself because you don't know yourself. And that's why we have to learn to be still and know. So this morning, I want you to know that the word silence and listening is really the same. For you cannot listen without silence. You know that? It's difficult to hear. And in the silence is when you're tuned in, tapped in to the frequency. You don't have to compete. You don't have to say what. You don't have to so you want to get to the place where you can hear. And it's in the silence. Many people don't like the silence because in the silence, they hear things. In the silence, there's a lot of noise. For some, when they get to the silence, true silence, it's a scary place. And then they may even be shocked to hear in the silence that still small voice that sounds audible. The first time Samuel heard it, he went to Eli 3 times. And Eli finally told him, when you hear that voice that sounds so audible that you think is someone in the room, say, here I am, thy servant listens to do what it is you would have me to do. That's a simple message this morning. How are you using the mute button? Are you muting God out so that because you are fooling yourself into believing that God cannot see that you are multitasking, that you are mixing this with that? No. Source knows. And Source respects when you mute it out. And Source stops speaking because Source honors your will. Sometimes it takes a situation to just get us to the point of just saying, I've tried it all. I've done this, I've done that, and nothing's working. But some of us won't get to the silence until we feel as though we exhausted all that we know to do. And the scripture says, okay, you can have it that way. After having done all that you know to do, then you stand. The Source makes space for you to have the experiences you need to have. But there is a better way. There is a more refined way. And it's not your way, but it's Yahweh's. The Hebrew term for God is Yahweh. And so we say this morning, the silence is golden. That's my message this morning. So I hope this week that you will join me. I believe it's going to be Wednesday nights at 7 or 8 p.m. I'll get that to you in the form of an email. But I'm going to go deeper into the silence. How silence is essential to hearing, to the knowing of what it is you must do next. But many of us haven't experienced the silence. And it's not until you experience the silence and make the silence part of your daily spiritual practice, will you be able to actualize the God in you in the way that's bigger than you. I hope something was said this morning that's uplifting and encouraging. I hope this morning that you've been expanded in some way. So before we move into the green room, we're right at 8:30, and Serendipity Sunday lasts for about 30 minutes. And then those of you who want to bounce, who want to leave, feel free to leave. But then I usually open up the back room for questions, for conversation around what has been shared. But if you want to also really grasp the fullness of what this message is about, we take it to application. So Wednesday night is a deeper dive that also gives an assignment that you take to application. Without application, there is no transformation. We live in a day and age where many people have information, but there's no transformation. They have information about love, but they're not able to exhibit love because they have not experienced it in a way that they need to experience it. They have not made it practical. They have not, you can't say you love God whom you cannot see, but then not love your neighbor that you can see. I was studying this week on the history of New Thought from one of the wings or arms, which is unity. And this was interesting to find out that unity, which is many of the New Thought churches that many of you guys are familiar with, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, who started the unity branch of New Thought here in Missouri. It was interesting to find out that at one point in time, they were espousing all these great truths, which were true. But at the same time, they did not even allow the individuals who were of African descent to stay on the campus. Isn't that something? You're espousing the love of God, the expression of God, and saying that God is in all of us, that we express as God. But when it came down to allowing those who were different from them, they could not live on the campus. I was reading a story about the late Dr. Reverend Johnny Coleman. She was wasn't one of the first Black ministers to participate in unity there in Missouri, but she was the first Black to stand up and say, your principles are not being practiced, and I'm not coming back. She had developed such a relationship with the student body, who were vast majority who were white, that they said, this is the early 70s, no, we won't stand for, the 60s, 70s, right, late 60s, and they petitioned and things changed. Things changed to the point where the Blacks didn't have to leave the campus and drive into Kansas City 15 miles away to rest or go to sleep. And they eventually could have a presence on the campus 24/7 like everyone else. And here's the point that I'm making here. So we have individuals who are espousing truths, talking about things that they're not practicing. But we all must learn to practice what we preach. Because it's not until the thing we have practiced, that until the thing we practice aligns up with what we preach, that the power of the thing we preach becomes present. All right, so a couple announcements. I want to say that every Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Central Standard Time to about 6:15 is about 15 minutes. It's not meant to be all morning long thing, but a 15-minute meditative engagement. Join us for that. Morning meditations. We have some dynamic speakers, facilitators who present inside of that 15 minutes. I'm there. We offer prayer treatments. If you haven't experienced that, consider doing that. It's Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Central Standard Time. You want to know more about that, you can go to the website, www.oasisspiritualcenter.com. Go over to the tab that says meditation or prayer, click on, read through it, and you'll have the number for that. In addition to that, go to the website, poke around. I'm upgrading the website this week, moving into 2022. That is more reflective of what we've evolved into. And so you want to make sure you're poking around out there, finding out what's going on, and all of the things you need to know about what it is we believe. Lastly, this morning, I want to say that the website offers a place where you can participate in the offertory at any time. If you receive this message, not just on a Sunday, but it could be late on a Wednesday night, you have the opportunity that you could sow a seed. You don't sow a seed into this ministry because this ministry has a need. We don't have any needs. We are one with Source, and where Source is, and where resources are, we're there also. But we also realize that Source uses individuals like you and I to be a blessing to others. And so if this ministry has in any way touched you, delivered to you, value to you, consider sowing a seed. Again, not because we have a need, neither because of greed, your greed. Sometimes people sow a seed in order to get the return, but that's not giving from the heart. When you sow a seed, you sow from the place of appreciation. When I give a tip to a individual who has served me in some way, it's an act of appreciation of the value they have brought into my life. It's sad that you can't even use that example anymore, because for many places you go to, they already have the tip incorporated. When you give them your debit card, it already tells you, says, Mark, do you want a 15% tip, 18% tip? The audacity. But I tip anyway. But the audacity that just because you served, you should get a tip. If you did not serve from your heart, with the servant's heart, if you did not serve in a way that brings value to that person's life. When I go to a restaurant, the wait staff should bring value to my being present there. Because I very well could be at another restaurant. I very well could prepare my own meal at home. But when I go to a establishment to have a dining experience, the wait staff should provide that experience. And the greater the experience, the greater my appreciation. And I reflect that through the seed of gratitude I sow. Likewise with the ministry. Many times, because of the exploitation of the topic of money, many people are not sowing into virtual ministries because they say they don't have a need, it's virtual. Well, you don't sow into a ministry because the lights need to stay on or the gas needs to flow or anything. You sow the seed because of the value you have received. So I want to say thank you to those who have supported this ministry throughout this entire year, those who support this ministry at the frequency in which they do, at the level that they do. But I want you to examine yourself today. Are you giving out of habit, or religious responsibility? Or are you giving from the place of, I find value here, so I'm going to give something that is valuable to me? So thank you for that. So we're right at 8:40. What I want to do this morning is open up for questions. Let me go here to pull up the chat. Awesome. Let me see if I can pull this up, make it larger here. Okay. Wow, we have quite a few people that made some comments this morning. Besides their blessings of salutations, Minister Tia says, the truth is simple. Oh, a simple message is all that is required to convey it. Silence, as Seppi said, silence is golden. Be still and know. I'm going to unpack that this week. There's some power in that. Someone spoke the first word of Kwanzaa, umoja, that is unity. And if we talk about unity this morning, we're talking about the unifying of you with source, with God. Now, I identify with Kwanzaa, been practicing it for years, presented to the community at large 30 some odd years ago. Matter of fact, as a little boy, when Kwanzaa first started, I was introduced to Kwanzaa. And though we did not practice it in my home, I was made aware of it. But I'm also aware that Kwanzaa and the principles of Kwanzaa, although they are ideals, we really don't live inside of it. We really don't practice it until the end of the year. And we practice this around that time of the year that is not even consistent with when the African culture would really celebrate something such as this. You know, but it's tied to Christmas, it's tied to money, it's tied to that. So today's principle is unity. So thank you for that, Umoja, Sister Trinity. And I will be doing some things later on in concert with that. Tip, Cheryl says TIP, to ensure promptness. TIP, to ensure promptness. Now I would like to just open up the line, and Cheryl, I would like to have you speak to that. So I'm going to, I believe you're here. Let me pop in, go into the chat. Let me see if I can allow participants to speak. So this Cheryl, let me see if I can open up the line for you to speak here through. Okay, 1 second. Okay, let's do this. I'll go to Q&A. If you raise your hand, if you got a question, if you got a response, if you want to say something, I can open it up and Q&A. I believe I can do it that way. Yeah, so just raise your hand if you got something. I was trying to open up this morning. Let me see something here. For some strange reason, that's why I'm really praying that the Lord sends someone who is gifted in backroom, that they will do that. Even, you know, we had a person that was doing it, but the resources was not strong enough that I can continue to support it. And I wasn't going to continue to support it inside of my own personal monies, because it's our ministry. So if you got a question or something, just go ahead and put it in the chat and we can go from there, because I'm not able to pull in the conversations this morning. Okay, so I do see a hand. I have a few things to say. So I'm gonna see if I can get you open here. Answer live. Okay. Would you like to answer this question live? Yes. Let me see if it's happening. Okay, so that still is not working for me. Let me see what I can do to get Felicity here. So bear with me 1 second. Okay, there you go. I think I can get it this way. All right, Felicity, good morning. And Cheryl, I'm gonna come right to you. And Linda, I'm gonna come to you. So don't go nowhere, you guys. Felicity, you have the mic.
Yes, boy, I really enjoyed this message. I just think it's such a topic for mature people, because there's a lot of nuance to it. Like you said, you could be quiet, but not silent. And what I love about silence is, as I was asking God in my heart, how to get beyond preconceptions and silence.
Break that down for us.
Yeah, learning about silence is a great way to get beyond preconceptions, because when God tells us something, we hear it with assumptions on what we think that it means, and then we act based off that. But it could mean something totally different. So how do we get beyond those preconceptions? And learning about silence is one of those ways that I've been able, like, really muting myself. Some of the stuff I've learned from Neville Goddard about, like, trying to erase your physical being, erase your face, erase your physicalness, erase everything. When you mute, just totally mute. And then you can hear in a deeper way, because it's natural to just assume that you know what someone means. It makes a conversation quicker when you're talking to people. But when you're dialoguing with source, you need other stuff. You need to, like, be able to go deeper, and let it be a process, and let it be a relationship, and let it, don't just, it's not like a one and done. Okay, let me go off and do that. You gotta, like, sit with stuff. So
I like, and the assumptions. And you ever had a conversation with someone and you hear them saying, I know, yep. They're not really listening. They're hearing what they already know or what they think they know there. But we got to get to the place where, when we're in the presence of source, that we are not just hearing, but we're listening. We're not hearing to speak. We're not hearing to give our position. We're not hearing to give God the sense of, I know that. But we are listening so that we may say, what must I do? Or that we may find out, what must I do? Thank you for listening, for sharing that. I look forward to engaging later on this week as we go deeper into this particular teaching. All right?
yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to take you back. I'm going to Cheryl, and then I'm going to come to you, Linda. All right, Cheryl, you've been unmuted on my side. You can unmute yourself. I think you. Okay. Good. Good morning.
Can you hear me? Good morning. Great day, everyone.
Awesome.
Well, I was speaking to the fact of the audacity of establishments to automatically include the tip in your bill. Tip, the acronym TIP is to ensure promptness. So I am, as you said, giving in a way to show my appreciation for the promptness of my service. It should not be automatic in my bill. Right. That is what a tip is. It's to ensure promptness, to ensure that I am served in a manner that is acceptable to me.
Right. So we're being exploited nowadays because it is as though it's assumed that you have to tip.
Yes.
Which is sad.
It is a sad assumption, although I generally tip as well because of the service, no matter how it is. I generally do tip, but it is the audacity of establishment to automatically include that. I agree with that.
And I will tell a person, the tip that I'm giving you does not reflect the value that I received from you. I'm tipping because I understand the principle of sowing. That because I am a deliverer of service, I'm tipping you so that others will tip me in addition to why I'm tipping you. And so that's so important. For the many of you who are on the call right now, I want you to know that you do unto others as you would have done to you, even when the person who have delivered to you have done you in. You look beyond the present of who is doing what to you. That's why the word says, we have to learn to love. We have to learn to forgive. We have to learn to look beyond. All right, Cheryl, thanks for that. Good morning. Is there anything else?
No, thank you. Great day.
Good. All right, good. Well, good morning, Sister Linda. How are you doing this morning? I put here ask to unmute. You have the mic. Good morning.
Good morning. How's everybody this morning?
Fine. First of all, let me start by saying my space that I live in is so wonderful. And I'm saying that publicly to those of you who are on this line. Linda was the individual who was instrumental in me finding the right place. And I really want to let you know that this space represents exactly what I was looking for. So thank you for being my realtor. Okay. So anybody in St. Louis, Missouri that's looking for a realtor, hey, I would highly recommend my dear sister, Linda. Well, good morning, Linda. Thanks for tuning in this morning.
Good morning. Good morning. You know what? I was listening to the beginning of it where your message for this morning, God is speaking. And it's like, are you listening? That is so perfect for going into 2022. Because sometimes we'll hear the Lord speaking to us, and then we question, okay, is that really God? And so I've learned over the last, I guess this year actually, and it was like just to trust God. When you're hearing something, it's like, that's not something just hearing, he's speaking to you. So learn to listen and be patient. And at one point, just like when I was about to give up on my kidneys, I said, well, maybe they have to remove the right kidney or the left kidney. And so when you had sent me those scriptures, you prayed, and then it's like the Holy Spirit was like, Linda, why are you giving up? Everybody else is praying for you. And I had to pray for myself and ask for forgiveness first, because I was giving up. And it's like, why are you giving up? So I thank God for everyone that prayed for me. And the kidney, she took the stent out on the left side and it's functioning on its own. So I thank God for that. And the silent part, I can't wait for Wednesday to hear the other part. Because
and I want you go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because when you think of silence, we need to be quiet. That's why he said, be still and know that I am God. So we just be still and just listen, and we'll get our answer, whatever we're praying for, what's on our hearts. He's going to reveal it to us, but we have to listen. That's the most important thing.
So I want you to say with me this morning, I am perfect.
I am perfect.
Whole. And complete.
And complete. Amen.
So I'm standing in total agreement that you're going to see the miraculous move of Source God in your life. We must move away from the human condition of it's normal to be sick. It's normal to be sick. It's normal for our bodies to malfunction. Till we go back to the word says we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We have dummied down the power of God because people don't want to do the work to experience the expression of God. How do you know you can't be healed if you've never been sick? I went through a COVID experience, and I want to say that I had to shut down the TV. I had to shut down all the people telling me to take this medicine, to do this, that, the other. No, I don't need to take. If I could take the medicine, or if I could take the antibodies that you're recommending, I could take the shot. But I stand, me, not you. I'm talking not to you, Linda, but to everyone who's under the sound of my voice. I am a spiritual practitioner. I am a spiritual leader. And I do not lead as the crowd, but I'm out in front of the crowd experientially. If it don't work, I'm not going to work it. And so I can see how what could have been a worst case scenario, because I stood in my beliefs and my expectations and the knowingness that I am perfect, whole, and complete. I don't care what the sickness you have, what the disease you have, what the diagnosis you have. Whose report are you going to believe? And the word says, be it according to your belief. If you think you need to take a particular vitamin, if you think you need to do a certain course of things, those are all material ways of attempting to express in your most perfect self. But there's a more perfect way, and it's the spiritual way, aligned with the mental way.
Right.
Sure. So Teresa said, listening is receiving. Most people are not listening to receive. They are hearing, but they're not listening.
Right.
Come on now. Awesome. Well, thank you, Linda, for sharing that. And I look forward to your continued participation when your schedule allows for it. All right. God
I want to share
bless
one
you.
more thing.
Go
Okay.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Was that I had to also change my diet drastically. And I'm gonna tell you, so it's
Mm,
not a diet, it's a way of living. So when I started
yes.
eating fruits and vegetables, very little meat, and the doctor, the same doctor that I was going to, I got another doctor now for my kidneys. But anyway, and I was watching the my sodium, my potassium, and the phosphorus. And so when I went, he said, "Oh, you're doing really, really good." And so I shared that with him. He says, "Well, no, just watch the sodium. That's the main thing." Now, and I thought, okay, now he just lost his client, because I know if I wasn't doing all three, then it wouldn't have happened where my kidneys are functioning, the level is where it's supposed to be, even better. And they were surprised, but it's like we have to do our part as well. And so that's
Yes.
one of
Now,
those, eating those fruits and vegetables.
yeah. And so I want to add to that. Even when I was going through the COVID thing, I could not taste anything other than sweet. I could taste sweet and I could taste salt. I could not taste seasoning. But the Spirit told me exactly what to eat. It told me to eat spinach, so I prepared myself. I didn't overcook my spinach. I put my spinach, my garlic, and I had tomatoes. I had those and I ate that. I drank a lot of water. And so your body will naturally tell you. So we need to learn to eat to live instead of living to eat. Our
Amen.
food is our medicine. Every pill that has been designed by Big Pharma is modeled after what it knew a certain nutrient in certain foods could give us, but it circumvented it by coming up with a pill. But there's something about things that come out of nature. Nature nurtures us. So thank you for sharing that this morning. So I
You're
have
welcome.
one more person here I want to share. I see a comment here in the feed, and it's from one of my sisters, Rael, one of my peer coaches. She says, I have a different take on I know. When I've spoken with my sister, my best friend, my therapist, we've also gained an understanding that in some situations, we actually do already have the solution. Some truths already lie within us. Well, I want to say this, all truths lie within us. It's just having the ability to access the truth outside of the knowledge base or the intellect and finding the truth in source. Now, I'm continuing on. She says, we know by certain cues and unctions that we should not enter a relation, a second job, a business venture, or a second job, a business venture, or we know, but go back and forth in our minds. And in the end, we often say, darn, I knew that. And even in your current space, Ausar, you knew when it presented itself, there is so much here. The key is inside that where your truth, that's where your truth, love, and solution lies. Thank you. I appreciate this. Thank you for that comment. And it's packed with truths. I do want you all to know that in this particular teachings, when I say I know, I want it to be from that which all of us has heard or stated at one time. When someone is sometimes sharing with us information and we say, I know, because we want them to know we're on the same wavelength or already know that. And so we're in an information age where people just say, I know, does not mean that you really have, okay, there's understand, there's understand, and then there's overstand, where you have mastery. Most people have an understanding. They have a consciousness. They have awareness of a truth or a possible truth, but they have not taken it to the next level of intimacy. In the scriptures, the law first mentioned, if you go back to Genesis, that's when we hear the word I know or know first mentioned, is intimacy that produces something. So that's why this ministry is based on application. Just because you are aware of the topic of the silence, it's not until you go into application. And sometimes life school gives you the lesson that you must engage. And so it lets you know that if you know it from an understanding, or if you know it just from an understanding, or you know it from a overstanding, which represents mastery. Thank you for that, Sister Royal. Awesome. Good. So it looks like I've addressed everybody who wanted to say something. And so we're going to close out this morning. And thank you all for participating. I look forward to seeing you later on in this week. Pay attention to the emails that are coming forth. And then, I like that my mom says, some people say, I know, and no, the next word is but. They see, you don't know. If I'm espousing to you a truth, and then you follow up with but, that tells me where you are. And what I found is it's best to make space for people with their buts. Let them have their buts. And you have to know you're just a dispenser of truth. You're just a light. And if people don't want to embrace the light or hear the truth, you don't continue to cast your pearls before swine. That is because they cannot assimilate it in a deeper way. Awesome. So I'm going to close this morning with the simple prayer. Right where you are, I want you to close your eyes, take a deep breath in, receiving the fullness of the breath of life, touching every cell, every system, every organ, holding that breath, allowing the breath of life to rejuvenate every cell, every system, anything that is atrophied, anything that is not working properly, comes into alignment with the harmony of the breath, which is life. Now exhale through your mouth. When you exhale, you release. You let go of that which once served you. That breath that once brought life has to be released. And you make space for the next because you trust that there is more where that came from. And as you move into this space called right here, right now, I decree and declare that this is the day that Source has made. We rejoice in it. We embrace the truth of the oneness of being with Source, with me, Source with you. Realizing where Source is, so is you. Realizing this one absolute truth, that you have the Christ consciousness and that you do not count it robbery or consider it robbery to consider yourself equal with God or Source. Not equal as in same, but of the same source. And so it is. Amen. As you go this morning, I leave you with the song we started with this morning, the song by Lisa McClendon entitled, You Are Holy. Listen to the words.
Oh, so holy. You are holy. Oh, so holy. What a privilege and an honor to worship at your throne, to be called into your presence as your own. You are worthy, oh, so worthy. You are worthy.